What's up, gamers? I'm here with the RDB, specifically engineered for all of your tactical gaming needs. We all know a good operator looks like this. So, what better way to finish off your kit with a firearm that looks just as tactical as your operator? Equipped with fully customizable LEDs so you can change to match your fit, match your equipment, match your environment, or hell, just flex on those pores, those trashy ass team members who have negative KDs. Okay, but realistically guys, can we please stop having Call of Duty operators like going the Fortnite route? I miss the old days of the good, really cool, war-looking guys. All right, everyone, I'm Jessie. I am here with the Kel Tec RDB today. Lights not included. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. This is actually a really cool firearm, so let's get started. If you guys have seen my bullpup video, then obviously you know that this was featured in that as well. But I do think it's worthy of having its own video rather than just a generic discussion of bullpups. So the Kel Tec RDB here is obviously chambered in 5.56. Comes in at a total of 27 inches, ignore that, with about 17 of those inches actually being the barrel. So realistically, this is gonna come in at a comparable size to like a 10.5 AR. If you guys have seen that bullpup video, then you know that this is honestly my first actual bullpup experience. I've held other ones, but never really shot any before. And you know, just quick little seconds in like a gun store, but no actual usage. But I've been very, very pleasantly surprised with this. Overall, a great experience from what I've had with it so far. It does come in at about 7 pounds, which for a rifle isn't anything special. But because it's a bullpup and all of the weight is in the rear here, when you do shoulder it, it winds up feeling significantly less. Honestly, almost kind of like toy-like at that point because it is just so front light, I guess is the way I can word that. But even though it does feel light when you're actually using it, the parts certainly are very rugged, robust. Everything was made with care. Although I at least saw the video where Brass and Hop broke the stock right back here. Brass, you were a moron, but maybe I'll bite my tongue on saying it's as rugged as I feel, at least. So just basic operating of this weapon. It is a short stroke gas operated system. But my God, is it the longest short stroke, so it honestly winds up feeling more like an AK at that point, especially the recoil is very familiar to what an AK would be like. So if you like them, maybe good, I don't know, bonus points there, I guess. The bullpup, they got some weird configurations here, but you can see the mag is right back here. I'm gonna show the good side of the mag. The mag is right back here, and the mag release is this fancy little tab right there. Honestly, when I first had this, I was a little weary of that. It felt like a weird spot because the mag is so far back. Obviously, when they're forward, it's reachable. But the neat thing is you can actually wind up hitting that with your palm and engage it that way. So instead of having to do this to get the mag out, I am chilly right now, this is not working. You can just drop it like that. But you can see I can keep my hand on the grip and just use the back of my palm to drop the mag, which is actually pretty convenient. It makes for some super sick tactical reloads, I guess. You don't have to move your hand around. So the gun does have its charging handle right up here. Gauge that back, which of course features everybody's favorite, the HK slap. And then you also do have the option of sending the bolt home with these little tabs back here. You can see there's one on this side and one on this side. So in theory, you could just push on either one of these, I guess depending what hand you're using, or I don't know, how you prefer to reload. That's an option. That's an option. So in practice, at least for me, I have a hard time using just one side of those little tabs. So what I wind up having to do is kind of C-clamp over and push down, which is still super comfortable, super easy to do. Just kind of like that, still one-handed. And again, even if that's not something you prefer, you do have the charging handle. It's super easy, so not a big deal. You jumping, Snow? Thank you for helping shovel. So if you've seen these RDBs before, then you might realize that this is not the handguard that it comes with. I have in my hand the one that comes, you know, out from the factory, which aside from just being kind of ugly, I have some legitimate gripes with. You can see here, it's this big, thick, honky chunk of plastic, which obviously bulky, hard to get a good grip on. I find, at least, I know I have smaller hands than most of you do, but I do find it a little uncomfortable to hold, which is the most minor complaint I have in the grand scheme of things. So while this will take a lot longer to heat up than something like the M-LOK handguard here, once it does heat up, this thing retains all of that heat for quite some time, which means when you hit that point, you're gonna have a hard time keeping your hands there. It's gonna be really toasty, really warm. And to make that situation worse, so you can see right here, there's this nice little pin. That pin's steel, and that pin is going to wind up making contact with the barrel, which means that's gonna heat up even faster. And unfortunately, you can kind of see where my hand goes here. It's right in the natural spot of where you want to grip the handguard. So, especially for you guys with bigger hands that have, you know, less work around, there's a really high chance that while you're firing, your thumb or something is gonna graze this pin that is going to be scalding hot metal and not a good experience. I've had friends that have used that and have burnt themselves on that spot. Wouldn't recommend it. So I have the M-LOK handguard here. This one is the Lucky Irishman handguard. Kel Tec does make their own version. I haven't used it. I can't comment on that one. This handguard here is probably gonna wind up getting hotter faster, but it's also gonna wind up cooling off significantly faster, making it a lot more comfortable to use. I can get a good grip around it. I mean, aside from just using the front grip here, but it's comfortable if that is a concern. And then I guess the bonus points of more mounting points on this side as opposed to this configuration. But Jess, the M-LOK handguard's not gonna retain 0. Which is a very fair complaint that some people have with these ones. I don't think it's as big of a deal as some might try to make it seem. You can see here on this handguard that the front section does have flexion to it. That metal is kind of easy to squeeze in. But realistically, the further back you go, the less that becomes a concern. So once you kind of hit this point, I'm not moving it. But in regards to retaining 0, you're gonna put your optic somewhere back here, which is gonna be on the rail, not gonna be a problem. And then, at least for my configuration, I still have my laser up here on the rail. So for my use, the laser is not going to be an issue, no different, which if you've seen my potting video, she's still doing great. But I know some of you might have to push the optic more forward, different configurations, different people, different preferences even. A lot of people might wind up wanting to put a laser, something like that up here, which in that case, I could understand why you'd have a concern. But like I said, the further back you go, the less flexion the material gets. So if you put the laser somewhere around here where these mounting screws are, I don't really think there's much of a concern. I mean, it might walk a little bit at some point. It's certainly not going to be a big noticeable shift. And I still think a lot of people can wind up fitting more on the rail than they think, which is a good thing. But aside from that, I don't think anyone cares if their flashlight's not holding 0. I think we're caring if it turns on and lights the room or the person. Don't use OLight, don't put that in. Which, that kind of leads me into the next point. Biggest complaints people have with bullpups winds up being the lack of rail space. I think the RDB is probably one of the best options on the market for rail space capabilities. You can see here, at least for my configuration, everything is on just fine. This is everything that I would have wanted to put on this. I'm not sacrificing any performance, any attachments. It's good to go. But I'm obviously a smaller person. Some of you guys want to push that optic more forward just so you can get a good sight image and a good cheek weld, which is fine. You still do have some wiggle room up here, but not much. So possibly an area of concern. Again, downside of bullpups, it's just the nature of their configuration. You do have the M-LOK option, things like that. But I do also want to note that I have had a lot of friends use this at this point. Everyone who is all different body sizes, most of them who are much bigger than me. And the way this is laid out has been relatively successful for everyone. I haven't really had any complaints on this setup. So even the taller guys are able to get a good sight picture between the distance of your eye relief to the optic. The laser's in a good reachable spot, so it works. You might need to tweak, but for a bullpup, it's an impressive amount of rail space, and I think it does a great job. So the RDB is fully ambidextrous, which is always a nice feature. It's becoming a more sought after feature nowadays, which is great. But aside from having, you know, charging handle controls, mag release is in a neutral spot, all of those good features that make it ambidextrous, the one really cool thing that helps with that is how it ejects. So obviously, downward ejecting, like I had mentioned, you can see all the brass is gonna come out here. That was a feature that I was actually a little weary of when I had first seen this bullpup, because I had concerns about where the brass was going to be going, how it was going to hit on my person. And in addition to that, would I be able to shoot prone? If I'm laying down on the ground and there's not much space for the brass to go, or at least to go with the force needed to properly cycle the weapon and not, you know, splash back up and clog things, whatever, that's definitely not a good thing to have on a design, but it handles it just fine. I had no issues laying down with this. It still cycled with no issues, no failures, no malfunctions came up. And even cooler, you can shoot this thing upside down. So if any of you guys have your Mission Impossible needs here, it will still fire and eject that brass with as much conviction as needed to properly cycle this firearm. So I don't know. Forget sideways shooting. This is the new gangster way to go about things. This gun shoots just fine upside down too. Thought I would catch one. The other area of concern that I did have with the ejection port being back here is how close it is to your face. Obviously not shooting into your face, but the gas is coming out absurdly close to where you are. Gas is always an issue for me. I'm sensitive, and I will say this in videos time and time again, but gas rises, right? So even though it's ejecting downward and the force is pushing it down initially, you would still expect it to rise up and come literally right to your nose. But even with this, even with the suppressor on, I found this to be an extremely enjoyable experience. Gassing was of no concern, not something I really noticed at all. Maybe if I was shooting in like some stupid, more confined configuration in which I'm setting myself up for those conditions, but realistically, not something I noticed, and this was actually kind of a really cool feature. Although one thing that might be worth noting, be prepared to get pocket brass. This thing kept ejecting right into my pocket. When I went home after shooting this, I had like 10 cases that were surprised in there. So just be aware of that. Not that big of a deal, but I guess it makes it easy for you brass goblins out there, right? Overall though, I am extremely, extremely happy with this bullpup. If this is how all of them are, I am very intrigued. I think for a first-time bullpup experience, I couldn't have asked for a better one in my hands. The weight distribution makes this extremely easy for me to use. I don't want to rehash my SBR video and my bullpup video here in regards to why that size is so important, but with all of the weight being in the ass here, even when you throw optics and lasers and cans and all of that on, the weight is still not forward. Realistically, it becomes more centered, which is still so much more manageable for someone like me that doesn't have the lever arm or the strength to sustain those front heavy firearms. And because of that, it winds up being something that I can very easily pull up and get a good sight image, find my target, retain my target through recoil, move between. It's so easy to use because of that weight distribution. I guess the biggest gripe I would have is in regards to how bizarre the layout of bullpups are. It's not something any of us are usually used to, right? We all know how an AR works. We all know where everything is, and you can swap between guns, and it is muscle memory to cycle through those motions. Whereas with something like this, you're gonna obviously have to think. The best thing I did when I had got this was honestly run through some 1R1 type exercises, just because that repetitive motion of just shoot, reload, made it super easy for me to familiarize myself with where everything was. And once you kind of get the layout in your head, this is a fantastic experience. I honestly would highly recommend it to anyone who is able to try one of these out to please do so. I personally had very adverse opinions towards bullpups, everything I read and hear online. I didn't think that it would be for me, especially because I'm used to needing that customizability with rifles. I am much smaller than the average shooter. I am not the intended audience. So having realistically no adjustability on this was a little bit daunting to me. But I find that for a large group of people and body sizes, this one right here has been a really good middle ground that none of my friends at least have had a bad experience using. I guess if I had to give any real complaints about this, it's gonna be in regards to the kind of like the stock that I had mentioned before. The fact that it had cracked, broke after someone tried to mortar it, that doesn't give a good warm and fuzzy. If you're a little rougher with your weapons, if, you know, situation needs for it and these are getting kind of tossed around, that's not something you want to have happening. But the fact that it did occur on the stock here makes me a little cautious of the pistol grip. You can even hear that ASMR right there. I don't want to say it's cheap feeling, but it's definitely not as rugged feeling as the rest of the firearm. So if the stock was able to crack that easily, I'd be wary of the pistol grip cracking as well with some more rough use. And the problem with that is while the stock does have aftermarket options and is easy to take care of should you crack it, the pistol grip, there's no aftermarket options for it. I mean, you could always get a new assembly piece from Kel Tec. It's obviously just less fixable. I don't want to say it's not fixable. It's just more of a hassle to deal with if you have that situation come up. I don't know what you guys are using your firearms for. I certainly don't baby mine. They are not safe queens, but I'm also not chucking them into trees and throwing them off cliffs. So I'm not exactly worried about it happening. But for some of you guys who might do more rough competitions, any of you guys doing like the brutality matches and stuff like that, something to keep in the back of your mind. Might not be the most robust in those circumstances. That's really all I had for you guys for this video. Like I said, overall, I am extremely satisfied with this. I hope you guys learned something, hope you enjoyed it, and of course, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for not crunching snow the whole time with your icicle lips. Yeah. You got icicle lips. YouTube's gonna think I abuse this dog. YouTube, this dog cries to be out in the snow. I just need you to know that. She spent 3 hours in the snow and then sat at the door hysterically whining because she wanted to play and dig and crunch more snow.